In this video, I'm going to be walking you through the key points you need to understand in order to deploy your application to the live environment. Deploying your app is a publishing action. So you're publishing everything that you've built out in the development environment over to the live environment. Every Bubble app comes with these two environments, development and live. In fact, if you go to your editor in the upper right corner here and click on this dropdown, you'll be able to switch between those two environments. You'll spend most of your time in the development mode. This is the edit mode. This is where you design your pages, you create your workflows, you set up your data structure. When you switch over to live, that is a read-only mode. You can't edit things in live. In order to publish your changes from development to live, that is when you're going to go through a deployment. Now, over the lifetime of your application, you may experience multiple deployments. That's actually very normal. So the first deployment isn't the only deployment. Deployment is essentially just publishing your changes, okay? So there is strategy around how frequently you want to deploy depending on how many changes you're making. It's a good idea to set up a schedule for yourself so that you're not kind of knee-jerk reacting to things. You want to make changes in your application and on some kind of a schedule deploy once all of those changes have been tested. You know that they're working, you're not introducing new bugs into the live environment, and everything gets released on a consistent schedule. A lot of people like to have a weekly deployment, maybe even a monthly deployment, depending on how often changes are happening. Of course, as you are first building out your application, you may experience more frequent deployments. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but do make sure you create a routine for your application's deployment over for the long term. Okay. Now, I mentioned that the live mode is a read-only mode. The exception here is the database. So as we've gone over in previous lessons, every Bubble application actually has independent databases for each environment. So you have a development database that you can access when you're in the development mode. Right here under App Data, I can see all of my development data. If I switch over to the live mode, which I can do through this window by clicking over to live, or from the app data, I can also switch to live. It's the same process here. I will see all of the data that exists in the live database. These are independent databases. I want to be very clear. Deploying your application does not copy data from one database to another. The database remains untouched. Deploying your application only affects the architecture of your app, the pages you've created, the designs on those pages, the workflows, all of the logic, okay? Even the data structure is a part of the architecture. So the data types that you have, the fields, their definitions, okay? The only thing that does not get deployed is the actual entries in your database. Those are separate. Now you can copy data between your two databases by going to the App Data tab here and clicking on Copy and Restore Database. This is a separate window with a separate set of actions and settings to move data from one environment to the other. You may not need to do this very frequently. And you can see that you can actually go in either direction, copying data from your live environment into your development database or vice versa. The safer direction is going from live to development. You want to be very careful going from development to live because anytime you copy data in either direction, it's an overwrite operation. You're not adding to the database, you are replacing the entries in that database. You do have control over which data types you'd copy. So once you select a direction here, you can choose either the entire database or specific data types, okay? So when you're first getting started, I do encourage you to play around with these settings so you can get comfortable with them and you know exactly what's going to happen before you really start working with real data that your users are going to bring in. You don't want to run the risk of accidentally deleting the live data that your users are creating. Now, if you happen to make a mistake and you end up overwriting, you do have the ability to restore your databases, either the development or the live, back to a previous point in time. Just make sure that you do it within the window available for your app's plan. Okay, Bubble will let you know how far back you can go to restore. Basic rule of thumb is if you know that you've made a mistake and you need to revert, you should do it as soon as you possibly can. Okay, you do have to be on a paid plan in order to take advantage of these features. Back to the deployment window. Okay, this is separate from the actual data entries. When you are ready to deploy, you'll click into this window here and you'll select this button, Deploy Current Version to Live. Now, if we look at my example here, Bubble is not allowing me to deploy because I have 2 issues still in my issue checker, right? These issues right here. Bubble will not allow you to deploy until you've cleared out all of your issues. That's a very good thing. You don't want issues hanging around in your live version. Issues are there for a reason. They're flagging either missing required settings or misconfigurations in your logic, right? This is something that you want to be aware of and clear out as soon as you can. Now, once you've addressed those things and you have no issues, you will be able to deploy. So right now, my 2 issues are that I don't have any Google keys in my primary settings here. So I'm going to type in some, just some random values so that it can clear the issue. So I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right. Now, obviously that's not a real key, but now I have no issues to fix. Okay. And so when I click on Deploy Current Version to Live, now I'm available. Now it's available to deploy, and Bubble is just going to ask me for a quick description of this deployment. So again, you're going to experience many deployments over time. I encourage you to be very descriptive here in this message so that if you ever need to revert your application to a previous point in time, very similar to reverting your database, you can also revert the structure of your app to a previous point in time. Maybe you deployed too early. Maybe a page wasn't ready and you want to revert it back. You can take advantage of that. I'll show you where that is in a moment. But having a descriptive message will help you understand when certain deployments happen, what date and time. It's very specific down to the second. And that can help you understand how far back you need to go so that you don't go too far back or you don't miss it, right? So whatever description you want to put in here, do that so that it is helpful for you. Once you have deployed, Bubble will publish those changes to the live version, and now you can look at your app in the live version of the URL. So you're not going to see version test in the URL there. If you go to the history window, this is going to keep track of all of your deployments. It's just going to be a list of them with dates and times, as well as any save points. Okay, now save points you can also create here in the same window, create a save point, and you'll see that Bubble asks me for a description. A save point is not a deployment. Nothing is going to get published to live by creating a save point. Think of a save point as a bookmark. Okay, so if you make many changes in your editor, but you don't plan on deploying for a few days or even a few weeks, but you still want to keep track of when major changes happen, save points are fantastic for that. Again, think of it like a bookmark. So let's say that I know I'm about to introduce a brand new payment gateway integration. So I would create a save point before I begin, and my description can be something like, before payment gateway integration. And then I'll save and I'll create that save point. Then once I'm done with my integration, or maybe I've paused and I've completed a certain number of steps, I can come back in here and create the next save point. Completed, first API calls or installed plugin and got a couple of actions set up. Again, however it is helpful to me, so that I can keep track of things that have happened, major things, major points in the application's development. Again, save points along with deployments are all going to be listed in this window here with all the date and timestamps, so that if you ever need to revert, which is what you can do here, right? We can restore. You have precise dates and times to go back to. And again, the plan that your app is on is going to dictate how far back you can go. Okay, so I can copy the current date and time. I can adjust these if I want, and then Bubble will revert. If you revert your application to a previous version, it does mean that you're going back to that point in time. So anything that you've done since then and the present day is going to be gone, right? It's going to be deleted because you're going backwards and undoing essentially everything you've done since then. All right. Now, if you are on a higher plan that allows you to have multiple development versions and you can work with collaborators, this is what this button here is for, to create a new version. With developers who work in teams, sometimes they'll have someone who's focused just on design versus someone else just on logic, or maybe even just creating a separate version for emergency fixes because they are independent updates can be synced with one another. That is a more advanced level feature that is more meant for development agencies and applications that have multiple collaborators. But every single Bubble app will come with these two primary versions, just your general development and your live version. Now, the last couple of things that I want to go over are the requirements for accessing the live version of your application. You have to be on a paid plan. It can be the first paid plan in order to deploy and access that live app, right? That live version. You also need to be on a paid plan in order to connect your app to a custom domain. What is not required is having a custom domain in order to access the live version. Every Bubble app is automatically hosted on a Bubble domain. We can even see that in our development version here. This is my apps ID fast track demo, and I'm on a Bubble hosted domain. This is not a custom domain that I've purchased through Google Domains, Bluehost, GoDaddy, any of those domain registrars. Okay, so one more time, you do not need to have a custom domain in order to access the live version. But in order to connect your app to a custom domain, whenever you are ready for that, you do need to be on a paid plan. You also need to be on a paid plan in order to access the live version. Okay. All right. That's it. Those are the key points for working with the live version and deploying, in other words, publishing your app's architecture to that live version. Don't be afraid of this. A lot of people tend to be very hesitant when they get started. You are going to have lots of deployments and you can revert back. Just think of it as, saving and publishing all of your latest changes. You don't need to do it super frequently, especially once you go live. You're going to want to have more strategy around how frequently you deploy, because keep in mind that when you do push a new version, when you deploy, it is going to ask anybody who's currently on your application to refresh the page. So you don't want to constantly be interrupting them in that way. Depending on your app's industry and the usage of your users, you may want to deploy things during off hours or on weekends. Of course, that's not always possible with every app use case. But again, come up with a strategy around that so that you can create a routine for yourself. Things are more predictable. You give yourself plenty of time to test, and you don't deploy too soon and then end up having to kind of emergency fix and deploy quickly again. Don't want to create any stress around this. All right, everyone, happy building.